By 1921, the world was supposed to be at peace. The Great War had officially ended years earlier. Treaties were signed, borders were redrawn, and leaders spoke confidently about a safer future, yet beneath the surface of calm speeches and rebuilt streets. World War I was still alive, not in gunfire, but in memory, anger, and loss. 1921 was not a year of celebration. It was a year of consequences. Across Europe, the land still carried the scars of battle. In northern France and Belgium, vast areas remained abandoned. Trenches had collapsed into muddy scars, and shell craters filled with stagnant water dotted the countryside. Farmers worked slowly and carefully, knowing the soil was still deadly. Even in peace, unexploded shells and poison gas lingered beneath the earth. For the men who had survived the war, returning to normal life proved harder than surviving the trenches. Many veterans had spent years living under constant danger. In 1921, silence felt unnatural. At night, they relived artillery barrages and gas attacks in their dreams. Loud noises sent them back to the front lines in their minds. There was still no real understanding of psychological trauma. What we now call post-traumatic stress was dismissed as weakness or shell shock. Governments praised veterans as heroes, but support was limited. Jobs were scarce. Factories struggled. Wounded soldiers competed with civilians for work. Some veterans begged on street corners, medals pinned to their coats, reminders of sacrifices already forgotten. In Britain, nearly every town had built a war memorial by 1921. Names carved into stone told the same story everywhere. Memorial ceremonies brought communities together, but they also reopened wounds. For many families, grief had no end. Women carried much of the burden into this uneasy peace. Millions of widows struggled to raise children alone. During the war, many women had worked in factories and hospitals. In 1921, they were pushed back into traditional roles, often with little financial support. Mothers aged early, weighed down by loss. Children grew up knowing their fathers only through stories and faded photographs. Germany in 1921 stood at a dangerous crossroads. Defeated and humiliated, the country suffered under the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Reparations strained the economy. Inflation worsened, savings vanished. Hunger became common, especially in cities. Former soldiers returned not to honor but to poverty and anger. Many Germans believed they had not been defeated on the battlefield but betrayed by politicians. This belief spread quietly but powerfully. Paramilitary groups formed from disillusioned veterans, bringing violence to the streets. Political extremism grew stronger with each passing month. The war had ended, but resentment had not. France, though victorious, remained deeply wounded. Large areas of the country were still rebuilding. Railways, factories, and villages had to be reconstructed almost from nothing. Hospitals were still filled with wounded veterans years after the fighting stopped. Victory felt hollow when so many families were grieving. Fear shaped French policy. Many leaders believed Germany must be kept weak at all costs to prevent another invasion. Trust between nations was fragile. Peace existed, but it was built on suspicion rather than forgiveness. Beyond Western Europe, the world remained unstable. Collapse of empires during the war had created new nations almost overnight. Borders drawn by distant diplomats ignored ethnic realities. Tensions simmered in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Civil wars and revolutions continued in several regions, claiming lives even after World War I had officially ended. In 1921, the League of Nations promised cooperation and peace. Its meetings were filled with hope and idealism, yet it lacked the power to enforce its decisions. Some believed it would prevent future wars. Others already doubted it could stop another catastrophe. Culture itself had been transformed by the war. Writers, poets, and artists who had survived the trenches rejected old ideas of honor and glory. Their works described fear, mud, and meaningless death. This generation questioned authority, tradition, and nationalism. The world no longer believed blindly in progress. Art grew darker. Literature became more honest. Music carried grief and reflection. The war had changed how humanity understood itself. Yet even in 1921, hope had not disappeared entirely. Children were growing up who had never heard artillery fire. Cities slowly rebuilt their streets and homes, cafes reopened. People laughed again, though often quietly. Veterans formed groups to support one another, sharing memories no one else could truly understand. Humanity was wounded, but still searching for meaning. The year 1921 stood as a warning. The world had survived the deadliest war it had ever known, but it had not learned all its lessons. Peace existed, but it was fragile, resting on unresolved anger and fear. The choices made during this uneasy calm would shape the decades to come. History would later reveal the truth. World War I did not truly end in 1918. It echoed through 1919 and 1920, and in 1921, it continued to shape the world quietly, dangerously, and relentlessly. This is the true story of 1921, a year without battlefields, yet full of consequences. A year of survival, memory, and warning. Because the war was over, but its shadow still ruled the world.